Hi, Michelle. Thank you so much for joining me today.
Thank you, Chad. It's always great talking to you.
Thank you so much, Michelle. I appreciate you hugely. As you know already, you're a huge inspiration of mine. So today, Michelle, you've graced me with a little bit of a chat about, well, I did a video, didn't I, about giant trees. Obviously, you've done so much work already into the Earth's grid. So we're here really to talk about your findings and your conclusions, really amongst some of your own work, and then some of what I've put forward as well in relation to the giant trees, just trying to bring all that together and make a fuller picture. So crack away, Michelle, what do you feel?
I was intrigued with your videos, and I think it's important to note that you and I aren't coming from exactly the same perspective, but within that, there are some amazing correlations. And you brought something to my attention that I had not considered before, and that's the importance of trees and the importance of trees on the grid system. And we can talk about it as we go through, because there are some places that you might see as a tree that I see as man-made infrastructure. Saying that, I'm very open to what you're saying, and that there are places that were giant trees at one time, and they're being harvested. And I think what it really boils down to, Chad, is between your research and my research, we can really see how the earth has been harvested, and not only the earth, but us. And so when you put it into that perspective and what they've done to this grid, it's mind-blowing. And there's a really good example in the PowerPoint that I put together of what I'm talking about, where one side you can make an argument that it was a tree, but on the other side you can make an argument that it's man-made. And then I want to talk about that a little bit. Perfect. And that could actually be a good day trip for you, Chad. It's not too far from where you live.
Perfect. Yeah.
So I'm going to start with trees. And when I saw your video, I immediately thought of the cotton tree in Freetown in Sierra Leone. And this is a place that I would not have even known about, except that somebody suggested that I look there, and I did a segment on it. So I learned about it. And there were some things that struck my attention at the time, but I still wasn't thinking of trees as part of the Earth's grid system. And your video helped shift my thinking in that direction, and a very important part of the Earth's grid system. So I looked into this, like I said, at somebody's suggestion, and this particular cotton tree is the symbol of Freetown in Sierra Leone. And in the narrative that we've been given, we were told that Freetown was founded in 1792 after having been a group of African-American slaves, again, we're told, starting in 1787, that had been fighting for the British in the American Revolutionary War, came to that area by way of Nova Scotia. So that's the story. And that these settlers, which they named Freetown, were said to have gathered around this tree and given thanks. Thanks to God for delivering them to a free land. The person that told me about this and said, look into it, said that it was a significant energy charger along with the architecture of the structures around it. I mean, I'm looking out the trees through my sliding glass door over here now completely differently. They're not this big, but they're pretty good size.
Can I just say, cut in 1 second, look at the top of that photo. Can you see that rainbow? Can you see the energy? It's on the above the white building. You'll see yellow, purple, green, red, pink. And I just feel, when you just mentioned that, then literally I've been looking at that the whole time you've been speaking, the energy steaming off it. I'll zoom in on the video and show people. You can literally see like a rainbow aura. Carry on, Michelle.
And sorry. I would not have seen that if you hadn't said anything, but you know,
Can you see
we
it
have
though, a little
different
bit?
gifts a
Can you-
little bit.
Yeah,
With you pointing it out, I can, but we
Beautiful.
each have different gifts.
Mhm.
And we definitely seem to complement each other in how we do things. And so it's not the same way, but we're skirting over commonalities between what you're finding the way you do your stuff, and I'm finding the way that I do my stuff.
Yeah,
And we'll be giving more examples of that.
of course.
And so when I was looking at this place, what really came to my attention was this building over here. And I thought, wow, that looks interesting.
Looks like
Kind
a
of
sword.
like a flying saucer or something that you see when you looked under the hood of a car.
Yeah. Yeah.
And, I thought, well, that's interesting. And I looked for information on it. And you see Leone petroleum, so it might be connected with the oil industry. I couldn't really find anything definitive. And then I found this card here, and that shows it here. So the cotton tree in this style of architecture.
Very odd.
And again, in the narrative, the colonials built this, or whoever. There's a story for everything. And, again, we'll see more examples of that as we go through. But none of this is supposed to have been done recently, or within the last couple of 100 years is when all of this infrastructure was said to have been built. I beg to differ. We're not being told the truth.
Of course.
So
Sorry,
I
just
came across.
before, could
Go
you
ahead.
just go back and just give me just a minute or two on that slide?
Sure.
Yeah. So with this one, Michelle, just I think you're going to get to it, but you see this roundabout here, the roundabout that you saw around the cotton tree.
Right.
Yeah, it's probably the same with you. Ring roads and roundabouts seem to be huge indicators. And obviously, as we know, if we thought of it as power or energy, it's energy moving around in a circular manner, shooting off in different directions. I think what's key with these type of ones is there's five ways. So it's like a star, isn't it? So the interesting things I found with this, just quickly, here's the roundabout with the tree in the middle. You've got the 5 ways ironed. It's the elevation of some of the places. Again, like, look at this. See this here? Like, look at that. That's exactly what I was showing in my movies. The type of, it looks like a stump almost, doesn't it? And then at the top, you've got quite important buildings. You've got the Parliament buildings and the Ministry of Foreign Affairs. Again, you've got the park here. So we're linking back to parks, which some of my videos have spoke about the importance of parks. I just found all that very interesting. And then, when we go out a little bit, it does seem like there's quite a few elevation points. Like this is another one here. This point here. That just point out to me. They kind of stick out on the map and are significant, and then things kind of are worked around them in some senses. But I'm nearly done. Just finally back to this one, and I just thought all of this was quite significant because this shows, you see all of this shows elevation again, and this to me would be, and look, it says tree. It actually says tree on it. So this to me is like the outline and the elevation again of a big potential tree. Well, multiple. Right. One here, one there.
So a big takeaway is this is all over the earth.
Yeah.
This pattern that we're seeing here. This isn't limited. And we're taught that Africa is like the dark continent and Tarzan, and that is very primitive. But again, it's a false narrative. All of this was here, all over Africa, all over the earth. And the colonial powers just came in and divided Africa up in the 1880s and, divvied out the countries and the resources and oppressed the people and trashed the place, basically. It's very sad.
What do you feel in regards to this being a potential tree?
And that's why that's kind of where we're going to have a little bit of a difference of opinion, but within that, I think there's middle ground, because I see a lot of terraforming of the earth in the research that I've done, and I've seen a lot of structures that look like, you know, they have flat tops and the sides, but I see that as in my mind, it's man-made. But if we look at it from a perspective, okay, where can we meet, is maybe the ancients built their infrastructure on top of old trees or something along those lines.
That's exactly where I'll be pointing at. That's exactly what I'll be saying. That these that's where I'll be headed to. Nothing else. Simply that, you know, like in movies like Avatar, they literally live inside the trees. So, like, I know it's you'd be terraforming the tree. So yes, it's half man-made, but it's being done out of a natural resource. You know what I mean?
And we're talking about the Earth being extraordinarily old. Millions.
Yeah.
I mean, they find metal artifacts in coal seams. Cups and things like that have been found in coal seams. So there's lies on so many levels, and you know, besides our origins and, you know, obscuring who we are and where we came from and what we're doing here, and space and place and time, you know, obscuring all of that, shape of the earth, whatever, they've taught to just turn everything completely upside down. If that's how the ancients utilize what was in their environment, you know, to me, it's still ancient. Because again, they tell us they build these structures within the last couple of 100 years, and we're talking about huge masonry structures. And I don't believe that. So how did the ancients terraform? And we'll be going into different areas, and I'll show some other examples. So again, I think within this, I think we can find places where we can meet with how we explain this, because using your own theory about it, you found an incredible amount of information.
Yeah.
And you're finding it here as well. The other thing I want to point out is that I've got, you can't see it because of the sunlight, but I've got two mesas behind me. So there's a flat top structure. Mm-hmm. There's stones around them, so it's masonry. And then the other thing is, it's in alignment with a place up on a hill that's very ancient town. And the full moon rises behind one of these mesas. So there may be different examples and different things that have been done. I think whatever the ancients knew, we've long forgotten about how they did things and what they did and how they worked with alchemy and the elements and created, you know, master builders and creators. So we've lost that perspective. And we're just left with puzzle pieces going, okay, where do I put this? How do I, you know, reconcile what I'm seeing here? But the points that you've made, and I wanted to go in, did you have something you wanted to share here?
No, just with you, what you're saying, I just think it's very relevant to look at kind of like the human body in terms of acupuncture points and different things like that. And I think you're right. I think that this is where I think we're both right. I feel that these points on the earth, you know, if there was such a thing as nodes, if you like, or points that we see, would be natural, but then would be man-made too, because I feel that there would be something natural potentially there, and if there was or if there wasn't, that would then be replaced with a man-made structure. So I feel we can meet halfway, as you're saying, you know, like, but we're on about the same thing, these points potentially of energy. And
I mean, I think everything on the earth is precisely placed for a reason.
Yeah.
Everything. Every building, every river, every mountain, if you will, every mesa with the flat top, whether it started out as tree or stone or both. Everything has a specific placement on this precision grid. And I didn't really go into the gemstone part in this presentation, and I'll just touch on it for a second, because I've seen correlations going along alignments, and I did a whole series on it where I found mineral or mines in correspondence with each place on this alignment. So I see that the ancients kind of built the grid like you build a car or a watch, where you have certain components in certain places for certain reasons. And coal's in there too. But every place I looked at in alignment had, and this is across the earth, had something to do with minerals or mining in places you wouldn't expect. Tip of Greenland, I found gold mine. And then just went on from there. So, and then I also understand the whole idea of mud fossils with, amethysts and gemstones and so forth, that we have crystals in our own bodies. Organic life has crystals in organically, and that when they've been, very old, you see it. So, again, I think there's probably a combination of things going on there. All right, so let's go on to the next slide.
Yep.
So, again, with the idea of these trees being part of the energy grid system, lately I've been seeing, correspondence between railroads and trees. And this is a good example. So this is the Cotton Tree Station in Freetown. An old picture because this doesn't exist anymore, which is quite typical. And I found examples in places like this is in Vancouver, Washington, in Washington State, where you've got a correspondence between a rail line and a place called Orchards, which was a town that had fruit orchards.
Mm-hmm.
And this particular streetcar only operated between 1908 and 1925. So they have these things running, and then they're gone after they don't need them anymore. And just to talk about this one really quick, this line was said to have been constructed starting in 1896, and the line opened in 1897. And then other lines were opened between 1898 and 1907, but that by 1974, this railway was completely closed in Sierra Leone, or Sierra Leone. And that today there's 52 miles, which would be 84 kilometers left, of privately owned railway that runs between the port and an iron mine.
Wow.
And that's it. So they took down a lot of these rail systems as soon as they didn't need them anymore. And my thought is that that's when, cars and buses, trucks came in and replaced everything. They had a form of transportation where they could monetize the resources and make a lot of money, and, shut down the rail lines that they didn't need anymore or want anymore.
Seems to be a very common thing where this electrical grid, again, we're talking about energy, is following a natural line or natural elements such as trees. And I think, as you say, this is all over the world, not in one location, everywhere,
Right. And that somehow this rail line is connected to these fruit trees,
mm-hmm.
for example. And another example of that is I found this Congdon Orchards in Washington State that had a rail line connected to it. And again, that's kind of on my mind when I'm looking at these things, like, okay, what's going on here? And I can't remember if this was before or after your video on trees came out, but I just started to, okay, maybe, this is really something to look into. And I just want to say, with the type of trees that are pictured in this advertisement with Mount Rainier in the background, it wasn't that long ago, I was watching something, it's called the Cowgirl Channel. I'm not a cowgirl, but I kind of work with one. So, but anyway, I saw a tree that looked just about exactly like one of those trees, not the tall ones, but the shorter ones. So there's one tree, and it's this view of this woman riding on horseback. The whole desert Southwest scenario is out in front, and there's one tree that looks exactly like that. And, again, before I wouldn't have thought twice about it. But that kind of goes into the whole idea of the desertification of what was originally civilization. And we're going to talk about another form of that towards the end of this, because I'm going to talk about estuaries, which are the places that you had pointed out in another video that looked like they were mud flooded. And I think that's exactly what we're seeing, but I've been looking at a lot lately, and I kind of have an idea about what we're seeing.
Can I just say, with what you've pointed out, with what you've obviously have saw the link, but I've linked the train lines as well to the asylums, as well to the hospitals. There's a link between it all, and we're getting close to it step by step. But I don't think anything's individual on its own. I like in that asylum video, I showed you an asylum which looked like a concentration camp. It had its own train line, and it went to a town called Preston, and it stopped there. It was almost like, which was a porting area again, so they could just chuck people on, take them to this thing, and that was the end. And then that was linked to a clay pit, which where you get the red bricks from, and all that starts to come in. But just quickly on this picture, which you might not agree with again, but if I come across this picture and I saw the orchards and the trees, I'd be like, that's what they're showing you in the background, that the mountain or the hill. Because in a lot of mine, as you've said, as I've said, that's a chop off or a break off, but that's for that's something different. But I feel like it's mockery. If I'm right in what I'm saying, it's mockery, and every picture has this. A lot of them have this mountain or this broken off tree, if you want to look at it, and it's just mockery to me. It's like showing you the front, but really the back.
Right. And mockery is a good word, because that's exactly what's been going on here. Mockery on a grand scale. Mockery of us, mockery of Earth, mockery of God, of creation. That's exactly what we're seeing. And bringing in inorganic life and artificial intelligence, and replacing us with that. Now, that's what their plan is. I'm not saying they're going to succeed. But that's what they've been doing.
Yeah, light's going to win. Light's going to win. Just finally, before we move on, this big white building, for me, these representations can be a lot of things. Now, we see these next to the big tree locations of the power, or if you like, just node locations of significant. So instead of it being this large tower, we see windmills, we see obelisks. But for me, that's just going to be a representation. And I feel you're going to go on to windmills at some point, but you'll always find a windmill, a tower, an obelisk, a stone circle. There's this, but again, there's female and male energy, and I think that's represented differently, either by the vertic, the going up or on the ground, or going under, because there's ditches and things as well. But sorry, Michelle, you carry on. Great stuff so far, loving it.
Yeah, no, I mean, we're gonna find a lot of different interconnections, and all we can do is give our best shot with what what we're familiar with and what we see and how it's all put together. But I think the bottom line is this was an intentional system that was worldwide, and I see a very benevolent, harmonious, balanced civilization that was here before the hijack that took place. I think it was beautiful. I want a time machine so I can go back for a day and just see what it was like.
Take me with
what we're finding, I think, is the cover up of this in the type of research that we've been doing, how it's been covered up, and how you can find this exact same things in England and in America. I mean, it's just crazy. So the next thing I want to talk about is in California. And again, your thoughts on this has really got me the wheels turning. What the heck is going on here? Okay, so this is Muir Woods National Monument in California. It's near San Francisco, and it's known for towering old growth coast redwood trees. It's on Mount tamalpais, Tamalpais, and you might want to look into that too and see if you think it might be a, a big tree stump. So now there's roughly 240 acres, which is 97 hectares of these trees here, and they have protected status. And it's an old growth forest, which is primeval. It's very old, and there's supposedly significant, has not had significant disturbance. The logging industry came to California in the mid 1800s, and at that time there was an estimated 2 million acres, and I'm not sure what the hectares are, 2 million acres of old growth forest in this area in the redwoods. So one of the places that is really interesting to note that this location in California is also the location of Bohemian Grove. Have you heard of Bohemian Grove?
Yeah, I've heard the ritual. It's famous for their rituals in the woods, isn't it?
Right. So in mid-July, the Bohemian Grove is privately owned by a private San Francisco-based club known as the Bohemian Club that was formed in 1872. And so every year in mid-July, they get together for about 2 weeks, and they're the most prominent men in the world. And they're known for, they have this encampment, get together, do whatever they're doing. And it's famous for its secret, not so secret rituals. So it's like you hear about it, you hear rumors, but you might have an idea what they're doing with the big burning owl there on the right side, what's going on, or right next to the owl, the fire, kind of in the, weird looking dress on the left-hand side. They're doing their rituals, what's really going on here. So it's interesting that they're there in this grove. Why? If they're doing unspeakable things there amongst large trees, just begs the question of what's the deeper meaning to all of that. And at this point, I would say there most certainly is one. But I can't sit here and say I know what it is, except that trees are hugely important.
Well, just a quick note on all of this. And I know this is, again, you're different from your thinking, but if we just look at, horror movies, how many of them are based in the woods? How many of them are based in like, all of the cult ones are for a start, but a lot of them, they're running through the woods and things happen in the woods. I think there's been so many hints throughout pop culture and different things towards national parks and forests and trees and different things. Like, I found something interesting on national parks the other day, obviously in regard to just all different missing people, and that's for a different talk. But yeah, sorry, Michelle. I just find it interesting. We get the supernatural elements around trees as well a lot. People, it's like even say ghosts and supernatural things are often saw in woods and forests as well. So what that would highlight, if anything, is a high amount of energy, or something to do with energy, that being able to,
right.
So
something, and it might be like Squatter Man, that symbol that you brilliantly talked about in Sport Circuits and Squatter Man, 2 separate videos, but they're excellent. That's a universal symbol for the electric universe, and probably a symbol of the energy harvesting that's going on at sporting events and things like that, because you see the same shape in football fields and so forth. Maybe the tree as a representation of us and life, the tree of life. And, we've got the same kind of branching patterns in us as, the veins, our veins in our lungs that you see in the trees.
Mm-hmm.
It's like a fractal. And that somehow these trees, I think you mentioned the Axis Mundi in your video about trees, maybe like there's one mother tree, and, everything's all connected to that, which kind of gets into the, I've only seen that movie a couple times. Help me out here.
The
movie,
the Avatar
the
movie.
Avatar
Yeah.
movie, yeah.
Yeah.
You know, where, you know, everything's connected. You know, I think that's probably what we're looking at, and they're trying to lower the collective vibration of all life by what they're doing in groves and in forests and so forth. So, you know, again, it's a spiritual war. And they don't pull any punches. Cathedral Grove is another old growth forest there in Muir Woods, and just wanted to point that out. And these coast redwoods are related to the giant sequoias, and they're further up the Pacific coast. These particular giant sequoias are the only species left on Earth, and they are currently listed as endangered species. There's less than 80,000 trees left, and they're constantly under fire threat. So, yeah, there's a lot of forces that are not wanting certain things around anymore, but these particular trees are, and you can kind of get a size comparison on this side where you've got the Statue of Liberty here, and General Sherman, estimated to be 2,200 years old, is almost to the top of the Statue of Liberty's torch. Not too far. It's 93 meters tall and 83.5, I think.
Huge.
So these, I wanted to bring these forward, even though I haven't really studied them very much. I thought of it when I was putting this together, because these are giant trees that are left that we can talk about. And you know, it used to be millions and millions of acres of these things. So, and then the giant sequoias in person.
Look at that. You know, this is what we're talking about on a grand scale, though, isn't it, Michelle? Like, the way I envision it, it's Avatar, but again, you've got to envision it in our own world as real. Yeah. You
know, and I've done work on mining, and your work is showing the mining that's gone on, and you know, they're doing the same thing. They were on that planet, whatever the name was. Same idea. They have to tell us what they're doing.
But it's disclosure, isn't it? These movies. I'm doing a movie now, which is based showing you that all movies are disclosure. It's not fantasy, you know, it's pure disclosure. But just on this point, if you don't mind, I've been having a look around the map on this location, and there's a lot of people that are arguing against the tree idea simply because they believe in the giant idea. Now, you know me, with everything in life, I'm one of these, let's hold hands and let's all come together, because I don't believe the giant people are wrong. I don't believe I'm wrong, and I don't believe you're wrong. I think we're all right. It's just different elements. Now, I'm looking around America, and America looks more like there's trees there, but it also looks like, and what we're talking about here is organisms. So to me, organisms can be a lot of things. You know, it can be trees, it can be, I don't know, we're talking about giant, maybe people, I'm just going to say organisms, these giants, whatever they are, but it does look like that, you know,
right, it does.
You have to come out, it's there, it's in your face. So, but it's not just trees. I'm never just saying, oh, it's all trees. Let's imagine the trees were there. There would have been giant creatures, beings living among these giant trees. So, and they would have, you know, so.
And I kind of fall in the same place. I'm not saying there weren't, you know, mud fossils. Yeah, there were. There weren't giant trees. Yeah, there were. But I also see a lot of intentional infrastructure and terraforming that I don't think are explained by mud fossils or trees. You know, I think, you know, if anything, there's a combination of things going on, and it was all perfection. You know, the big lie, you know, so many big lies about humanity and our capabilities. And I think we were fantastically capable of doing these things at one time. And, you know, I don't think it was that long ago that this happened. Whatever happened that we're going to talk about in a little bit, I think it's been within the last couple hundred years. You know, and that they inserted this new timeline on top of everything. So I'm going to go on to Gardiner's Island, and this is on the eastern tip of Long Island in New York, New Jersey area. It's actually right below Connecticut, but it's New Jersey, New York bight, and it's an estuary system. And I learned a lot looking at this system. And there's a whole lot going on Long Island, and especially the eastern end of Long Island. A lot, and I've done a whole video about that. So this island is located between the north and south forks of Long Island. It's been owned by the Gardiner family since 1659, when Lyon Gardiner, an English engineer and colonist, founded the first English settlement in New York here. Lyon Gardiner received a royal patent in 1639, we're told, from King Charles I, giving him the right to possess the land forever and the title of Lord of the Manor. And as far as I know, it's still in the family. Sounds awfully feudal, doesn't it? The feudal system never went away, I don't think. I think it was just, transplanted to North America.
Well, new masks, new faces in it, new, they change your name, change your flag. I don't know. What do you want to change? Oh, everything I'm finding in England, they've changed the name so many times, or just took an E off it, or changed the O to an A. You can't trace it,
Yeah. I mean, to my knowledge, Lord of the Manor is not an American thing.
It's English. Like, I've recently come across, funny enough, the Lord of the Manor around here. These men, I think, were the men that when you're talking about this thing happening, this reset, whatever we want to call it, this change, these were the key players, some of the key players, these families, these earls, these lords of the manors.
Yeah, and that's clear. There's a lot of stuff going on, Chad, that I've been researching, and it's like they brought in a completely new nobility to replace the old nobility. And the old nobility were the ancient people, the Moors, and that's what I see. And it's not just me guessing; it's a lot of input, a lot of insight. That there was this ancient civilization that dated back to Mu, and it was continuous on up to relatively recently, and it was also would have been considered the Atlantean civilization.
Yeah.
But I'm going to go into my thoughts about that later on in this video. So there was a new nobility that was coming in to replace the original landholders and the original lords of the manor, and they were Moors or Blackamoors, or however you want to look at it. They were in England. You can look up Morfyn, 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 when you have a chance, and you should see an old coat of arms and a new coat of arms. And so they were systematically replaced. I think that's what the dissolution of the monasteries was all about during the reign of King Henry VIII. I'm really suspicious of that guy, because a lot of things were going on during his reign in the history we've been taught. Dissolution of the monasteries. The monasteries were the repositories of genealogy and heraldry and all of that, and it was replaced by the College of Arms in 1550, or a little before 1555, but that was when they moved into their new official location in the city of London, and they became responsible for all the genealogy. And I think that was kind of what they were doing, as they were creating a new nobility. So what's interesting about Gardiner's Island, and the reason I brought it in, is because Gardiner's Island is only like 13 kilometers squared in size, which would be a little over 5 square miles. It has more than 1,000 acres of old growth forest on it, which is considered by some to be the largest old growth forest on the northeast coast of the United States. So this tiny little island,
wow,
has old growth trees on it. It's kind of struck my mind when I looked at it. Now, I hadn't thought about this before, but this little area right here kind of looks a little Starfortish, doesn't it?
It really does. It really does.
Lopsided Starfort. And that's come up in your research too. there's a windmill on Gardiner's Island,
Mm-hmm.
and we're told it was built in 1795 and added to the National Register of Historic Places in 1978. And when I saw that about what you had about windmills, I wondered what's the deal with windmills for a while. I've come across a lot of them that are no more, or they had their sails taken down
Mm-hmm.
and melted during war drives and things like that.
Mm-hmm.
You know, begging the question, what's the deal with windmills? And I know you've been finding a lot of them too. If you had anything you wanted to bring up or talk about.
Yeah, so I just wanted to show you, really, I don't know if it's much, my tabs are ridiculous. So what was we on Gardiner's Island? Bohemian Grove. You know what I find, just like places like this, I was looking on your map and it's just little ones like this. Look at that, like around this Carson city. Like, I don't know what it is that grips me about it, but you can see all the little like towns just like planted around it. Do you know what I mean? Like just almost just ready to harvest this thing, what was ever as it was there. You know, like I don't know.
Oh,
It's just like.
So while you're moving over to the other side of the continent, Incline City that was in that area around Lake Tahoe makes me want to go back and look into it, because inclines are rail lines that go straight up the side of these kinds of places with flat tops.
Yeah.
And they've been mostly taken down. There's a few that are still around, but most of them are gone. There's quite a few in Great Britain.
The reason they've all been taken down again, like you say, there's not many, like there are, but compared to when I was, say, a kid and before that.
Mm-hmm.
What I found interesting about this place, Gardiner's Island, was it was right next to. Did you notice that as well?
Oh like, yeah, well I knew about it because I just did a whole study of that area and it's mind blowing.
You want to speak about estuaries to us, and then we can bring.
Well, I'm going to talk about estuaries. I've got slides about it.
So we'll get back to your slide. What do you think about this, Michelle? I found that in the UK just randomly when I was looking at the old mines. Look, it's right next to a mine. It doesn't give much. It doesn't give much information on it at all. But
you know, we're pretty much, without Google Earth, we wouldn't find these things. You know, we're pretty much, you know, on our roads that we use every day without even thinking about what's on the other side or, you know, around us. So we're kind of, you know, corralled, you know, in certain places, and then there's all this big countryside all around us.
But these are some of the quarries that they're next to. But I just find sites like that significant when that's there. But yeah, so UK, we'll come back to this in a minute in regards to what you've got to say about things, because it's something that I noticed a while back. Just, you know, as soon as I started seeing your videos on the mud floods and so forth, when I started looking at the Google Earth maps and I started seeing these influxes of water with mud around them, and then like huge towns built on the banks of them, and it's all your major towns. So like in the UK, it's Liverpool, Blackpool, you know, London's down there. You've got the big one down in Southampton and Portsmouth, which is all of our ports, and then like down in, you've got Plymouth, but you've got this one, and they're huge, you know, and everywhere you follow them, it leads onto a massive city. And then at the same time, in the center where I am, as you can tell from my accessing things, Birmingham, they all do kind of lead to the center. So, you know, I think Birmingham being the heart was, this is where we're a little bit different to the coastal places. This is like this center bit here, I feel, and this is what you're going to talk about in Scotland. It's ridiculous, you know, like up in Scotland.
Next, I want to go to the Derwent River Valley, which is near you.
Okay.
Let me, oh, there we go. So Derbyshire. And Derby's in the geographic center of England. And the Derwent, okay.
Yeah.
There we go. The Derwent Valley mills are considered the birthplace of the factory system and the core of the Industrial Revolution. So that's the River Derwent, and then Derby's here.
Mm-hmm.
You know, again, you have these, you know, beautiful brick buildings, and you have, you know, this, you know, clearly, it's even more clear when you see it in a photo, man-made watercourse.
Yeah.
Like, that's another example.
Yeah.
And that is a example of that picture is of Cromford Mill, and that was the home of the world's first water-powered cotton spinning mill. And so you've got this, you know, this nice waterfall going on in the masonry. You know, they want us to believe that falls are natural, but I think they were very much a part of the grid also, and served a specific function. So there's that, and then you find very similar things in North America. You know, same idea, mills, textile mills, you know, water courses like this. And then Lom's Mill in the center of Derby was considered the world's first fully mechanized mill. It was a silk throwing mill, and it was said to have been built in 1717, which is significant for me because that's the center point year of the timeline I've identified between 1492 and 1942, which I think this, you know, this new narrative has been looped on that. 1492 was the year of the fall of Moors in Granada in Spain and Columbus's first voyage. And 1942 was midway through World War II. It was the year of the Philadelphia experiment, according to some sources. And 1717 is 225 years in the middle on either side of those two endpoint dates. So 1717 is like a significant date for me, a year for me. And it's on an artificial island. Again, we don't question, you know, who's building this, who's building these artificial islands that are all over the place. And it seems like the testing grounds for this new industrial system that's coming online. And I'm going to give another example of that here in just a moment. So this is an example of what you could identify as a tree that I might identify as a man-made structure, but this is what's called the Heights of Abraham in Matlock Bath in the Derwent River Valley. It's the same, basically the same name or idea as the Plains of Abraham in Quebec City in Quebec. And this is where a battle was said to have been fought in the American Revolutionary War in 1775 between British and American forces. So you have the Heights of Abraham here, and you have the Plains of Abraham here. And then you have the old world structures on top of that. So, I mean, to me, that wasn't built by the people that said they built it. That would have been pre-existing on top of this flat top. And this is the type of place that you would find funiculars or incline railways. Mm-hmm. And, you know, it's the same idea where it goes up, and there might be one of them here. I know there's one in Quebec City. So it's a railway that just goes straight up and down, back and forth. It's like a cable-driven railway.
If you imagine, as like the people in the trees, think of Robin Hood. To get down from the top of the trees, they use zip lines, didn't they? And it's almost like this version. But there's two things with this. I don't just think all these are tree stumps. Again, the variety of things. I've done the video on tree stumps, but you know, it could be mounds that like as you're saying, and I'm happy for both. Like each site would have to be examined to see if it was a tree stump, a mound, something else. You know what I mean? It's right. Like
exactly.
That's all. I think that's the fairest thing to say. I'd never say everyone's a tree stump. I think there's a variety. I'm unsure on that one. Again, I think it could potentially be a tree stump. It does look like one, but then it could be a mound. Who knows? Who knows?
So I just wanted to share this. So this is what I'm talking about with the funicular. And this one's in Quebec City. It might be on the same location, you know, where it's going up to the top. And these are all over the British Isles.
Yeah, yeah. I'll go on holiday to places and we go on these down to the beach because it's too far to walk. They're still in use, some of them around the beach places. Like there was one at my zoo, Dudley Zoo, that's out of use now though. Again, it was a castle. Dudley Zoo is in a castle, and this castle was a big castle, you know, back in the 1500s, and it had one of these again. But what was the castle built on top of? That's what we've got to ask. Again, it was built on elevation. So it was built on one of these, basically.
Right. You know, and I think the building material choice was probably, there was a reason for it. You know, whatever they were building on top of served a function on this grid system. And, you know, they basically deconstructed the whole thing, and what they haven't destroyed, they put into use somehow, or they've turned into a control system. Banks and museums and colleges and, you know, secondary schools of all kinds, prisons, you know, kind of a coin toss. Is it going to become a university or is it going to become a jail? Because you see the same kind of masonry architecture in both places.
Yeah.
And this is also at Matlock Bath. So this is how you get to the top of the Heights of Abraham.
Wow.
And so there's a cable car. There's two caverns. This is the Great Mason Cavern, and another one is the Great Rutland Cavern. And they were both mined for lead ore and fluorspar up through the 1700s. So again, you've got the mining thing going on. That's just the day trip I was thinking about for you, Chad.
I'm well up for it. I think I'm well up for this. But
this area.
Did you mention to me that there were houses built into this particular rock?
The one that I was thinking of was Kimber Edge.
That's where I'll buy. Yeah.
Yep. So they look like what you would, like in North America, we would call cliff dwellings. Like Mesa Verde in Colorado. But they're in Great Britain.
Okay.
So another thing about Derby is the Railway Technical Center, and that's the technical headquarters of British Rail, and it's considered the largest railway research complex in the world. So this is in Derby, and Rolls-Royce is in Derby, and it's a global aerospace, defense, energy, and marine company. Now, before you talk about this, I want to skip across the pond and make a connection between Derby in England and Sayreville in New Jersey. There's a red box around Sayersville to the left side, and this is also part of an estuary system, the New York-New Jersey Bight.
Okay.
New Jersey's first proprietors were John Lord Berkeley of Stratton and George Carteret, and they granted land here to the Morgan clan from New York in the early 1700s. Sayreville received its final naming from James Sayer Jr. of Newark, one of two co-founders of the Sayer and Fisher Brick Company in 1850. So 1850 was like a red letter year too. There's a lot going on in 1850. And you're talking about clay pits and bricks, you know, and you're seeing the same thing over here. And so there's extensive clay deposits in the area.
Wow.
And this particular company, Sayer and Fisher, became one of the largest brick making companies in the world, you know, relatively quickly. And the Raritan River Railroad operated freight and passenger service here between 1888 and 1980. So this is what's really interesting, is if you get a comparison of the logo of the Raritan River Railroad and Rolls-Royce, there's no difference.
Wow, that's intriguing, isn't it? That.
And actually, I found this place. I was tracking an alignment from Washington, D.C. It was a long distance alignment. And that's how I found this place.
Can I give you an observation on the logo? I think the name for it's a monogram. So I've been finding these a lot, like with a lot of my videos. If you know some of the pattern ones, what I do with these logos is rearrange them. And I found these R's used a lot, and there's multiple meanings that you could look into with them. But just taking, say, the one R, flipping it, which I'll do on the screen for people, and putting them together, it kind of creates a head and a body, and it almost could represent the two hemispheres of the brain. Do you know what I mean? Or the two sides of man. But there's a lot of interpretations to do with that.
No, I just want to make the point that the Planned Parenthood logo looks a lot like that too, with P's instead of R's.
I'll tell you a logo that's literally the same, just quickly. This is the same logo. I wonder if it's got any link to it whatsoever. Richie Rich, look. He uses the same R's. Can you see it?
Mm-hmm.
So I just, it's prominent. The double R's is look, you can almost see it here. You know what I was talking about with the with the head.
That's interesting. Yeah.
Yeah.
So it's like the crown chakra.
Yeah.
With the wings.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
Yeah, exactly.
That's a whole nother decode, but yeah.
Yeah. So that's there though. What was I wanting to show you? Just quickly with the Derby, because you pointed out Derby. I don't think, we're drawn to these places, aren't we? Something guides us to them. But one thing that I think might be interesting to you is all the ley lines that run into Derby. So below is a stone circle in Derby. And literally, I've never seen in England, based off this map, because there's so many different laps with ley lines, etc. Based off this map, so many ley lines run through one area. So this would be signifying that Derby was a significant place of energy, power. And it's just funny that that's one of the places that you picked. It's literally, if we zoom out, in terms of, instead of, because like Stonehenge is down here, there's lines that cross, and it's one of the strongest. Apart from there, this is one of the strongest places in the UK. And then the reason why I think I'm so prominent in Birmingham is because loads of lines run through Birmingham as well, down to Stonehenge, because that's like directly below me. But I just really found that interesting. Did you know about all those lines running into Arbelo?
Not Arbelo. I started my journey being fascinated by megaliths, particularly in Great Britain.
Okay.
And I just want to point out, I found Derby. I was doing a long distance alignment from Algiers in Algeria. So Sayreville I found off of Washington, D.C., and Derby I found off of Algeria.
Wow.
Algiers.
Wow.
That's what I'm saying. I was looking at these data points, and that was like my first, source of this information that I've been sharing. What I saw, I've got several series on my YouTube channel about that.
That's crazy, Michelle. That's brilliant. Like those links from all around the world. Wow.
So I want to kind of bring back this whole idea of what I think we're seeing here, and basically I think we're seeing. Okay, I'm going to go into that in just a second. I'm going to leave it here.
Oh, sorry. A tree. Also, the double R's. We forgot. If you did it, instead of being a head, it's a tree. I can't believe we're doing one about a tree, and I didn't say it's a tree and it's stump. If we put it together, I've got to say it, Michelle. Sorry, I had to put it together.
That's all right. No, that's fine.
We're talking about trees.
What we're here for.
But as you've already pointed out, the tree follows the human system anyway, so they're very closely linked. Sorry, I just had to say that. I was like, God, as if I've missed that.
There's a lot going on here.
Yes.
So what my conclusion with this segment is that I absolutely believe there was a connection between all of this, and it makes sense to me that the Railway Technical Center in Derby was the test center for bringing the railways back online after the mud flood. That's what I'm getting from what I found. And I mean, again, you find rail lines all over the place, and I do go into that later on in the presentation. And you talked about reservoirs in the last video, or one of your videos, and you were talking about natural video or reservoirs. And again, we see both. We see man-made and we see, natural. And
Yeah.
I've seen them around quarries and things like that. So the Derwent River Valley has a number of reservoirs, dams, that kind of thing. Excuse me. And the source is said to be Howden Moor, Moor.
Mm.
The Rolls-Royce Center is on Moor Lane, Moor. This wasn't a name picked out of thin air. They're remembering the people that were originally there in this name. And, typically if you look up the definition of moor, it's, a landscape that's devoid of life, and heather might grow there. But if you look pictures of moors, they're filled with masonry, stone.
Yeah.
It's the remnants of the Moor civilization there. In the States, it's called something else. Other places it's called something else, but in England in particular, it's called moor. And so that's just another clue. Okay, so this is the Howden Reservoir and Dam, and it's the first of three that are consecutively located on the River Derwent. So you've got, going down in elevation, you've got a beautiful masonry structure here. And it goes into the reservoir here. So I just wanted to give an example that I could think of off the top of my head that is a man-made reservoir.
Yeah.
It's interesting, there's information here. So this one is the middle of three reservoirs in the upper Derwent Valley, and this is in northeast Derbyshire. Both the Derwent and Howden dams and reservoirs were said to have been built between 1902 and 1914 and filled with water between 1914 and 1916, which, oh, by the way, would have been during World War I, but, slight detail. And these are massive facilities here. So I want to make the point that there's a railway here that's called the Bamford and Howden Railway, said to have been constructed between 1901 and 1903 from Bamford to the south of the reservoir to Howden to carry the many tons of stone required for the construction of the two dams, and that the Bold Hill Quarry in Grindleford supplied well over 1 million tons of stone needed for the construction of the two dams, but it was closed in 1914 with the end of the railway following soon afterwards. So they built the railway to build the dam, and then they shut the quarry and the railway down. Short period of time. And this is basically what's left of it. Thoughts, Chad?
What are your thoughts?
The story we're told BS.
Yeah, I'm with you on that one, 100%.
But, that's what they tell us. And when you start looking at these things, it's like, that doesn't make any sense.
Have we got time just to have a quick Google Earth of it, just to see what it looks like on Google?
So they're telling us that they built the railroad to carry the tons of stone required to build the dam and the reservoir.
Okay.
Or two dams, and that the Bold Hill Quarry in Grindleford supplied well over 1 million tons of stone needed for construction of the two dams.
It's here, isn't it? That's where it is, isn't it? So around about there. So this is one of the old maps of it. What I find interesting on a lot of these places, if you saw these everywhere, these terminus that I brought up in my video, it's ancient burial sites. So it's almost like a mound, but it's a burial site of something found there again. But to be honest, my thoughts, I'm kind of with you on this one. You know, a lot of the ones I see anyway in my area, which I said were natural, it was the fact that I felt they were man-made, but that parts of it could have been natural. And the way I see it is like veins and meridians, how they work. So it's like scooping out. But again, that's why I wouldn't ever argue natural, because there's a man-made element to it. And the shape doesn't have to necessarily follow it exactly. So it's man-made. This has been man-made by a man. But could they have been taking something out?
And I think they were masters of energy too. So, you know, maybe they were like acupuncturists of the earth, and they knew where the energy lines were, and they, worked their magic within that. It's just technologies we just can't even imagine.
I know.
I think that were employed by these builders.
Another thing with water, as you already know, for some reason, I see these pools of energy as just water, as energy. So like if we were looking at the earth as a circuit board, this would be an abundance of energy. It, in its physical form, it's water. In a different form, it's something else, but they're almost collective reservoirs of energy, and they're called reservoirs, like reserving energy,
So my next slide is kind of going to give an example of exactly what you're talking about. And in the research that I've done, Chad, I consistently find railroad tracks right next to dams and waterways and canals. I mean, it's like all of this was part of this interconnected system.
Yeah.
There's something going on there. And I gave this, so you've got these in connection with dams, and this is in connection with canals. They're right next to each other. I mean, you don't build perfectly like that with the technology of the 19th century that we're told all of this was built. It's like, and the crazy stories that go along with it, like the C&O Canal. This is in Maryland, Point of Rocks, the C&O Canal and the B&O Canal. And there's a whole long BS story that goes along with that. The BS story being that the ground was broken for both projects on the same day, which was on a July 4th of whatever year. And this particular spot was hotly contested by the railroad and the canal builders. And there was this whole battle over it. And, eventually the canal won the case, but then the canal was obsolete within a short period of time because the railroad was so efficient. That's the story that goes along with these things.
No.
Like, oh, we put all the energy into building the railroad and the canal, and then, don't need the canal anymore. So,
yeah,
it doesn't hold up.
With a lot of this, Michelle, do you agree that we have to think outside the box? You have to really, again, I think a lot of fantasy we've been shown is actually disclosure. And it's a case of finding the keys of the truth in that fantasy disclosure and mixing it with what we know about what we can see. And I just feel you have to really take in consideration and be open-minded with what we're doing, to get anywhere.
And really to get to the truth, you just really have to step back and let go of everything you've ever believed to be true.
Yeah.
You just have to let it go and look at it with, a whole new perspective, because that's the only way you're going to be able to find out what really happened here. Mm-hmm. And for whatever reason, I unplugged from the Matrix probably in my 20s, because I've just lived a different life and made different choices. And whatever I did woke me the heck up starting in the early 2000s is when I started to wake up. And for me, it's just about getting this out to people and hopefully help with the collective awakening, so other people can see it too. Because they really have no power over us except what we give them, the world's controllers. And their narrative is just collapsing. So, we're blessed to be living during these times, as strange as they are.
Mm-hmm.
So I wanted to talk about estuaries, which we've touched on a little bit. And these slides are from a recent video I did comparing Washington State and South Wales, but it was really based on somebody's suggestions that I was following up on, and I just started to see all of these synergies between South Wales and Washington State. And there were some that I found that I didn't really include in my video the way I wanted to, because it's like, okay, well, I've already made my point. What you see in Wales, you see in Washington State. But I'll talk a little bit about what I found here. So this is Puget Sound in Washington State. And this is in British Columbia. So it's up on the border between British Columbia and Washington. Lots of stuff going on down in here. But I wanted to talk about the estuary. Again, you see the same muddy kind of appearance.
Yeah.
And this is where 10 so-called river systems come together. And I'm like, they're canals, but I'm going to give better examples here in just a moment. What we're told is that it was carved out of the advance and retreat of massive glaciers during ice ages. Well, that's a standard explanation. And then in South Wales, you have the Milford Haven waterway. And that was a natural deep harbor that was said to have been drowned at the end of the last ice age. Okay, move us over here. For Welsh speakers, I'm sorry, I don't mean to butcher anything. The Dagoldal estuary is an estuary that is part of the system, and it's where the western and eastern Claddaugh come together here. This is the word I'm trying to pronounce. And there's two other rivers, the Carew and the Cresswell. So we have the Carew and the Cresswell. So one of the ways they've covered it up is they call canals rivers. Now, a lot of these river canals have canals that are identified as canals in close contact with them. So the main river is supposed to be natural, and all these other canals are said to be canals, man-made. So what's interesting is that you have, this is where the two rivers, the West Claddaugh and the East Claddaugh, come together in Wales, right here. And you find the same configuration in river confluences all over the earth. So this is in Sudan, where the Blue and White Nile come together. And there's our Welsh rivers coming together. There's where the Missouri and Mississippi come together. And then over here on the right in Kansas, you have the same thing. These are just a couple of examples. I can produce bunches more. So in reality, is where two canals are coming together. And I gave some other examples of mini river. Okay, so this is Port Isabel on the Texas Gulf Coast, and there's a estuary system here, Las Palomas Wildlife Management Area. So you've got all the muddy areas around here, and then you've got this long canal that's called the Brownsville Ship Channel, and it's pretty straight.
Yeah.
And I've seen this trident shape in, I think it was in Vietnam. And I saw the exact same shape there. So this is off the coast of the Gulf of Mexico, and you have Port Mansfield in the same area. And I've seen this same entranceway in a lot of different places, Florida, in the Bahamas, you know, all over. It's a man-made entrance there. And so that's all around Port Isabel. And you can see the canals here. I mean, that's not natural. That's all man-made. And I've seen the same thing all around the Gulf Coast of the Gulf of Mexico. I've seen it in Australia, the Gold Coast. I've found canals all over the earth, cities with canals. It was like this was a civilization that, I don't know if all roads were canals, but they were at least coexistent with each other. And I think a lot of roads today were probably canals in the past. So they're very comfortable on water. Okay, so this is in South Wales, and the River Lochore and its estuary is, the close-up is right here on the right. Okay, again, you have the muddy appearance that you were pointing out earlier when you were talking about it. And this is a kind of a big picture. The Burry Inlet, B-U-R-R-Y, Burry is suspicious to me, because like we talked about, there's a lot of mockery here. So you find places like suspicious sounding names like Burry,
yeah.
Gravesend, Kill. There's a couple of places around New York. I might have it on here to show if we haven't passed by it already. Let me see something real quick. I'm just saying it because it's like, here we go. This is Staten Island. You have Fresh Kills landfill, Arthur Kill. There's a waterway here called the, I want to say it's like the Kill Van Call or something like that. I mean, there's a lot of kills here. There's
Stanton
a Gravesend
Island.
over here somewhere.
Stanton Island. Take a T out of Stanton Island and change the end. It's Satan Island. You know, it's you're right. It's you can. That's when I looked at us. It's Satan Island.
You know, bottom line, they just tell us things with words and place names and things like that.
Yeah.
So, anyway, I just wanted to share that when you look at a place named Burry Inlet, because again, what we've been taught about history is completely false. And if you're married to the historical narrative, I'm sorry, but
yeah,
you know, no cognitive dissonance here.
They wouldn't be watching the channel, I don't think.
Yeah, it's like it's just gotta be there. Otherwise we're full of it, and you don't want to be here anyway. So the estuaries here in South Wales, and there's more examples, but these were ones that I came across. These are in the Solent between the Isle of Wight and the British mainland. And again, you have a lot of clay. These are estuaries here. You've got clay pits. You see the estuaries here. You've got these big stones on the beach. If we don't question how they get there, what, huh? And they're masonry. They're cut and shaped stones.
Yeah.
But it's not a narrative, so that's crazy.
And you see this everywhere. If I show, one day I'll just go down to Bree and I'll send you a video. The rocks on the beach, we're talking like the size of 4 men. No one questions it. They just keep walking past and they throw rubbish in it. Throw the crisp packet down there and walk past.
That story repeats itself over and over again. And there's railroads around here. And this is in Portland, Oregon, and you have a Starfort Point here that's in the wetlands natural area here. You've got rail yards here. This is a homeless shelter now, and there does seem to be a correlation between human energy harvesting and these help facilities. you know, there definitely seems to be a connection there. So that's the end of the presentation there. But these rail lines are built around these marshlands.
Yeah.
Who's going to build? Who in their right mind is going to build a railroad through a marsh or next to a marsh? But that's a story that's told over and over again. And what I'm really strongly believing is that these estuaries are sunken land. So an estuary is where there's a mix of fresh and salt water. It's brackish, it tend to be shallow, and that these land masses sank along the coast from whatever cataclysm was caused, and then they rebuilt the civilization after that event took place, or a series of events, however it happened, and that our whole new narrative was superimposed over this original infrastructure that have, you know, these stories that don't quite add up to explain how they got there. So I believe it was deliberately caused, the cataclysm, and that it was done by malevolent beings who had a plan to take over the Earth's original civilization for their own benefit. And they can't touch us, so they had to get inside us, our heads, our education system, everything, to do their bidding and not know. You know, they kind of cut us from source and from each other, created the divisions that we see, created the terror that we see, the wars, the misery, the suffering, the diseases, the solutions, you know, build more jails, you know, whatever.
Convert the old world buildings into jails.
Right.
Yeah.
So that's kind of my theory, is that with this massive cataclysm, you know, must have slammed the shorelines and caused a sinking of these places. And for example, in the correlations between Washington State and South Wales, found orchards in Washington State, I found orchards in Wales. You know, no big deal, right? I mean, you bring your fruit trees over with you when you come and settle the new land. But my working premise is it was already there. And that this civilization was the same all over the earth. And the other thing that I found that was a correlation is, come on, brain work. Anyway, where I was looking at in Wales, across from Swansea. So there's Swansea Bay, and it's Mumbles. Thank you, Mumbles, Wales, which also might be a mockery, but Mumbles, Wales, was known for its oyster beds. And in the 19th century, there was this frenzy of, you know, harvesting these oysters from these beds. And there's also oysters in Puget Sound in Washington State. Oysters are like barnacles, like coral. They have to have a hard surface to attach to. And, you know, so it makes sense to me that there's something underneath the water at these places that have sunk, that sank as a result of this. And that's why you find things like that in very different places.
But
there's no connection because there's not supposed to be, and it was just something they did. Oh, oysters, let's go get them and sell them and exhaust the resource. There's no more, you know, which is really this consumerism and make money, profit driven new system that was brought in to harvest everything.
Michelle?
So that's the end of my formal presentation.
You've been absolutely fantastic. I feel like you've given... So just in regards to everything, I think you've explained it well, though, haven't you? You know, this ancient civilization, and I feel you've put so just finally in regards to the trees, as an overall perspective, do you feel they play quite a big part, or do you?
I do.
Yeah.
Because of you bringing it to my attention.
Yeah.
Say, well, I need to look into that. And then seeing all of the correlations between rail lines and energy like the cotton tree in Freetown, you know, and how many more, you know, how many big trees aren't there anymore that were in these circles or whatever, that it was a functioning part of this whole energy grid system. Well, you talked about the giant things. What if everything was bigger?
Great point. Now, just on this point, anyone that hasn't watched it, watch Downsizing, and it'll give you a great perspective. It's a movie, and they downsize. So if it's hard to conceptualize, you know, for you just watch something that will give you the idea, and it's quite easy to imagine with something like that giving you the visual aspect of it.
I'm ready.
Downsizing takes the pressure right off.
Plus, you're really making a difference.
You mean all that crap about saving the planet?
Yeah.
Downsizing is about saving yourself. We live like kings. Got best houses, best restaurants, Cheesecake Factory. Got 3 of them.
In Leisureland, your $52,000 translates to $12.5 million to live on for life.
Hey, how's everybody doing today?
How
Yeah.
did we get here? Yes, there were giants in the world. How did we, you know, go down in size? How did we have our lifespans limited? You know, how did we go from breatharians and not needing a restroom in a building? If you read about the old hotels, no bathrooms. There's just a lot of inconsistencies, and they've got an explanation for everything, but it's like a...
How do you, Marcel, how do you feel about a rush? You know, you're familiar with the Russian doll scenario. How do you feel about a Russian doll scenario in the sense of what we're talking about, larger things and smaller things growing out of those larger things? So let's imagine the Earth is an organism, but that was only a part of maybe something bigger. And then I'm just trying to give you an idea whether you believe there's anything outside. And then you imagine a giant dying. Okay, a giant dies, and then it's like the human body. We die, maggots grow out of us. All different organisms that are smaller will grow out of us. So if a giant died, ultimately there'd be smaller things that would grow out of that. So on the scale we're talking about in terms of the Earth, it could be something. It's an organism, so it's a huge organism. And then what, like when we find, say, these dragons, you know, like how Roger the fossil, he's found that massive dragon. We're talking about things that have come out of a bigger organism, and then potentially something that's come out of those organisms until it minutes down. You know, how do you feel about that?
You know, I haven't really thought about it, but I hadn't thought about trees before. You know, I think it kind of gets back to the origins of life and the universe and who we really are and how we got here and the holographic nature of the universe, you know, the idea of different Earths or worlds, you know, first world, second world, third world, fourth world, fifth world. You know, there's things that are out there to find that, you know, that certainly don't fit with what I think, which was that beautiful, harmonious civilization, which I believe was the original 12 tribes of Israel, and everything was perfect around the earth. But then you see, you know, pictures of, you know, gray aliens with bulbous eyes wearing priest garb in the historical record. So where did that come from?
Yeah.
You know, there's just things that even with what I'm seeing, and I'm only talking about what I've researched and what I believe to be true, but there's things that don't fit into what I think took place.
Yeah.
So, you know, I don't know what that means, but I do know that there's been a deliberate misinformation, disinformation, gaslighting of the human population, so we wouldn't know, so we would be confused, so we would be at odds with each other, to, you know, keep us from knowing the true nature of the universe and all of that stuff. You know, that's real. We've been given so much false information. We've been, you know, trained in it, educated in it, and it's not worth the paper that it's written on.
No, you're right. You're right. One final thing to show you, if you don't mind, is just I found these interesting. Obviously, I've shown them a little bit in some of my videos, but the inner rings to a tree, and there's different elements to trees, so different rings would be different materials or different things on the long term. And I just found the root system very interesting. It was like the estuaries you were just showing. A lot of we find this type of shape, which is also in the brain, isn't it?
Right. That's right.
So everything imitates itself and is replicated and mirrored, but we find this in the brain, in trees, on the earth. And I'm with you. I do think a lot of what we see is man-made, but then there's parts that I do feel kind of, it's like when you were showing me some of those channels, the way I was seeing it in my mind as well was, like arteries in the heart, how you've got that one that branches off. And the reason why, the answer to be, well, why would they repeat themselves across the earth, is because if it was an organism, then it would repeat itself, because it's following, like in our body, how we would have things that repeat themselves, like certain arteries and veins would look very similar. But I am with you as well, but I just wanted to bring that up because I feel that's something too, and we have to acknowledge it because it's repeated throughout the macro micro. Do you know what I mean? So I think I feel what we're doing is right. We're bringing together the man-made and the natural elements, and I don't think it's neither, but I think both's relevant, Michelle. I really do. And everything you say, I can't disagree with. I completely agree. And then everything I find like to do with natural, I think it's true as well. So yeah.
And I mean, clearly we're finding the same things in different ways.
Yeah.
I mean,
That's
the same
most
things
important.
are popping up, and we didn't even touch amusement parks, but I think amusement parks were a significant part of the grid system too, for the original civilization, and that people were, actually having fun at these places that would like recharge the whole system.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
I mean, there's definitely something that we've not been told, and somebody's making a profit off of it, whether financially or energetically, however. And so, hopefully we can just keep shedding light on these things, and people will start to see for themselves and, kind of get awake from this whole experience of having been on Earth now and in the last couple hundred years and gone through this. We don't even know what happened in those asylums in the 19th century.
Yeah, no, like, and that's what I'm coming across the most now. There's so much that I haven't found out that we're going to discover, because I know your determination. You're just going to find so much. So I feel like we're at a moment now where we feel like we've found a great deal, but in a year or two, we're going to find so much more. It's just going to keep happening. So we're on a great journey together. I really feel, and you're doing great things.
Yeah, well, you are too. And, it's like, the universe wants this information to come back out. And if you participate, if you are acted to impulse and you follow through on that impulse, you're going to get information back more than you ever imagined. And that was a big part of how I got started on this journey, as I started going to places where I was living in Oklahoma, around Oklahoma City. And I would go there. I was like, oh, that looks like a wall, a canyon outside of Oklahoma City. And I would go there. It's like, oh my gosh, So, but had I not gone to a lot of places like that, there's a lot of information I wouldn't have gotten, and probably wouldn't have started putting the pieces of the puzzle that I got together. That's where it started for me, actually going to places.
So as a final point for people watching that are almost want to know how to get into this or to see what you're seeing, would it be like, I've just thought that's a great idea, isn't it? Get out, go to your parks, go to your forests, go to nature and look, use your eyes and see what's around. And is that one of your is that what a starting point? Yeah.
And I tell people, you just have to go outside your front door. or your back door around
Yeah.
your community. Older buildings in your community, you know, we talked about rivers as canals. Old buildings, you know, does it, what they tell you about that building make sense? Could they have built that in the late 1800s, early 1900s, like they tell us? You know, so, you know, it's not hard. You don't have to go far. Just start looking and asking questions.
Thank you so much, Michelle. I adore you. You were the start of me in terms of deeper conversations. You're an inspiration to so many people, and as I always say, you're that light that you know, that helps people find themselves and find you, or find something to in this dark place at this dark time. So I thank you, and I thank you on behalf of my viewers that are going to view this wonderful video and your wonderful time that you've dedicated. So I thank you so much.
Well, thank you, Chad.